Top 5 realignment questions of the day. Because, again, there's just more and more that pop up. And we'll ride the wave until there's no wave to ride anymore. But number 5, do G5 schools really have a shot to move up now? Like, maybe SMU gets in the ACC. And we'll talk about the ACC in the very next one. But do they really have a shot to move up now? Or is this the beginning of the end of what their opportunity is?
I think that schools like Memphis and the likes of the Boise States, those schools are probably out for a good long while,
unless there's a huge shift.
There would have to be some monumental things occur,
unless the Pac-12 reaches out.
Right. But then is that a power? That turns into the whole. Is that a Power 5, or are you just going sideways, basically? So barring something monumental, it seems like those schools are out. But SMU, there's this whole little ACC thing now that's out there, and I've seen various degrees of reporting on that as far as like the way it sounds. Is it close, or is it like they're just talking? Like that's it. They might be a third wheel joining the Pac-12 schools in Cal and Stanford, but I think SMU's got a shot. But for everybody else, it seems like it's going to be really hard to come up with a scenario where they get an invite. And I just saw where San Diego State, as a matter of fact, and I'm trying to know who exactly this was, if it was their AD or if it was the president, and now I can't find it. But they came out and refuted that CBS report on their intentions to start a new conference and trying to get into the A5 and all of that. There's a little Twitter thread by one of the San Diego State folks debunking, I guess, at least part of that article. So, I don't know. Regardless of that article, I think they're a long shot anyways. So, it seems like SMU are bust at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 4. Can the ACC do anything to help itself? What can they, with the way they're locked in, with the way that, we'll see Clemson has a board meeting tomorrow, and it may or may not have anything to do with realignment. We've seen these things happen. Florida State's attitude towards this has been well documented. But how does the ACC help itself? Do Stanford and Cal help it, or are they just, kind of paddling in a circle? Does SMU help the ACC? I don't think really. Those 3 schools aren't going to get the money that's going to make the Clemson, Florida States, and UNCs. There were 7 schools that were in that all had this same feeling to one degree or another. Are they going to make those schools happy with those 3? Probably not. And, when it comes down to it, you're going to have volleyball players going from San Francisco to Miami. That is a haul. I've made that flight before. It sucks.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I've heard a lot about the student athletes, and I'm just wondering why people keep bringing it up, knowing full well the adults don't give a damn about the student athletes at this point. Like, I don't know why we're pretending that they still do. As far as worried about travel and all of that, I'm sure that there are some that just aren't the ones making decisions that absolutely do. But, the ACC positioning here looks like it would just be market grabs. Go grab the Bay Area, go grab Dallas, and I guess talk to the TV folks, and that would then lead them to giving you more money. And then if SMU, like it's being said, is offering up, hey, we won't even take anything really for like the first few years. We'll just pay our way into the Power 5 or Power 4 or whatever. Then I saw somebody mention, well, then I guess you just give all that extra money to Florida State, and then they're happy, and then everything's good. And so I don't know. Maybe that's the roundabout way to do it. I really have no clue, because on the surface, that doesn't really excite me, the addition of any of those 3. It would make sense. Hey, other sports would get way better. You get a couple new markets, but the one part about Sankey talking earlier, one quote that I did see was he mentioned in regards to SEC expansion, they're not really interested if you're not bringing
pro rata, right?
Pro rata, and that even means FSU wouldn't fit the bill there. And look, I know it makes sense. Like, if you go get Florida State and Miami, like, that'd be cool. It sounds cool. But the SEC is about perfect right now. Like, it really is. It's about as perfect with Texas and Oklahoma being added as you could possibly get. It makes sense regionally. You can cut the map. It's all there together. You've got representation across basically every state that you care about. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that FSU threat until we see something different is nothing more. But I don't know that making the moves that they could potentially make or a rumor to really do that much either.
No, look, I don't think now. While if they have to add them, they will, or if they decide they're going to make more money, it's not about that. But I don't think that when the presidents and ads and it's not just Florida. Like everybody says, well, Florida's not going to want FSU and Miami. Yeah, they certainly wouldn't, or Clemson. They're not going to want that. It's a whole swath of that conference not wanting to give 3 schools that have won national titles the same amount of money that they have.
Sure,
like that's not just. And then no offense to A&M, this is not A&M. This is kind of a different thing because you're talking about a whole region of people that have kind of deep-seated ties as opposed to you being mad at your old conference mate.
I mean, don't you I know that? Hey, go add Virginia, and it's like at that point you're just adding to add, And so I know Garrett was shaking his head. But I think the conference is about perfect right now once you add in Oklahoma and Texas. Yeah. I don't think you need to do anything. The money's going to be great and all of that.
Number 3, how long does the crazy travel last for Olympic sports? I'm going to be on this until they figure it out. Because, again, you are talking about sending people, and if the ACC does what they're doing, that's as crazy as some of the other stuff. But if you've got to make that Berkeley to Syracuse, New York flight, I mean, that is rough. That's 5-6 hour flight. That is long on a commercial airline. And all those things that are going to have to go, it's not going to be so bad for the East schools going west because they'll only have to do it some of the time. But when you're talking about a road schedule for every sport for Stanford and Cal, that would be all on the East Coast. The furthest west school that they're going to visit, if they do that, is freaking Louisville. Louisville. That's not west of much. I mean, so there's all these things, and it will affect all the other conferences too. Because
do we ever say that about West Virginia? Even though
I think it all the time about
West further west.
I think that all the time about West Virginia.
That's what West Virginia thinks about all the time is how far away they are.
Yeah. That they're going to have to
go. If they had a better option, they would have been in that better option a long time ago. Yeah. They're kind of stuck in the Big 12. I mean, to be perfectly honest. So, I think if obviously the Big 10 comes calling for anybody, they're going to move there. But yeah, I think West Virginia's long been pining for a more natural connection, and Cincy's great, but they'd also love if Pittsburgh was around and, schools like that.
I just think it's weird that when the ACC had the opportunity to add them, which they obviously did when the Big East fell apart, that they didn't, especially considering that they added. I mean, they're rival. Like they've added over the years. Who are West Virginia's Big East rivals? Were Pitt and Miami, and they've added them all. Mm-hmm. They've brought them all in, and then West Virginia at the time was like, nah, we don't want West Virginia, and it would have made a lot more sense. Happy to have them in the Big 12 as someone who covers this league. They've been fun, but like that. It still doesn't make sense to me, and they have to deal with that just like everybody else. Number 2. How does this all this realignment affect bills in Congress? I don't think very much because I don't think Congress has a grasp on it, but I do think that there's going to be a lot of pushback on, all right, so you are trying to protect the student athletes, right, with this NIL and all that, and they should. There should be bills protecting them, and, let's stop scammers all when we can. But if you're trying to restrict and all this, especially that Tuberville and Manchin bill that is very restrictive and transfer portal and all that, then how can you justify schools doing this? Like, how can you as schools, you want this, you say, well, we need to protect the student athletes. All right. Well, tell that Washington volleyball player who has to go to Rutgers and Madison before she walks back into a classroom in Seattle again that you really care about her well-being.
Yeah, I don't know how that overlaps or not, but I think again it's pretty proven they're not really worried about that volleyball player.
But it does have to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's going to have to be part of the conversation. But I just think that ultimately leads to all right, well, we're not sponsoring volleyball anymore, mm-hmm. and I think that's probably the path you start to go down because there are going to be tough questions like that, or it just eventually you do it a couple years and you realize this is stupid. Let's just do this for football and basketball, and then everything else is under different umbrellas. And I think that might be the direction that we eventually go.
Yeah. Which brings me to the next. Thank you, Craig, for the nice lead-in. Will college football ever have a leader?
You know who might be the leader if based on all the reaction I've seen to Sankey today, is a lot of people are saying, why doesn't he just take over? Because he's probably the voice right now that's the largest and the biggest and the most powerful in the room. I would love to see Mac Brown or someone like that. But again, I don't know that. They need somebody who has balls, that's not afraid to make a decision that's best for college football.
Yeah, well, that thinks about it holistically as opposed to everything is an individual. Like it's all, it's ridiculous. It's like there's all this tribes that you have to come together with, and we as fans deserve for them to start thinking of it holistically because
you're not talking about the NCAA with him. You're talking about as college football. Yeah,
college football. Yes,
like a czar, like we've heard. Yeah,
they need to look. It's grown big enough now that where you're having schools willing to fly cross country to play all their sports, the money is big enough now that it needs to be treated differently. It has to be treated differently. You cannot just keep going, well, this is the way that was. Yeah, you know what? When nobody cared and there wasn't, there were 4 TV channels and there was 1 game on a week, then, yeah, it was different. Things are different now. Things are very, very different. So,
yeah, I mean, it'd be great to have a leader and somebody just with one voice to talk about all these topics. I think he would fit the bill, Greg Sankey. I think, Mac Brown, those kind of figurehead guys are really that. I mean, I don't know, and I say that not knowing how fully involved Mac Brown is with legislation and things of that nature. So, I mean, maybe he'd be well-equipped for it, but I think somebody like a Sankey who's already involved with all of the different machinations of, what it takes to run college athletics, especially big business college football, I think he'd be somebody that would be a great candidate, absolutely. And I don't know who else you'd throw into that mix, but he'd be right at the top of the list. But to answer the question, yeah, they absolutely do, and I think it's long overdue. But I don't know if you can get everybody to agree on that because they're all so out for their own interests that who's going to cave and say, well, Sankey's an SEC guy. He's going to, and then that's just all it turns into again, and that's why you're kind of where you are to begin with.
All right, Paul, thank you very